If you're listening to this, it's estimated you'll spend roughly 90,000 hours working in your lifetime. That's 1/3 of your entire life. If you're anything like me, you've probably asked, what am I working for? Maybe you've thought about quitting your job, changing careers, altering your relationship to work, or trying not to let your work rule your life. And if that's the case, this series is for you. Hey there, it's Chad, and welcome into another episode on my series, What Are We Working For? On a Level Deeper podcast. If you're here and listening to this episode, I've got to imagine that you're similar to me, meaning you think a lot about your work and your career and the role that these things play in your life. And, well, maybe some of that thinking and questioning and feeling has led you to the question, should I quit my job? I mean, it's a logical question, and heck, it's one I've asked myself and acted on not just once, but a few times in my life to this point. So, my friend, today we're going to explore that question. I think so often it can feel like such a big and daunting thing to overcome in life. And this big question of, should I leave my job and should I quit? And if I do, what will I do next? And so this is at the crux and at the heart of what I feel like a lot of people are wrestling with. So my hope for today is that we can make this question maybe a little bit simpler or a little bit more approachable so that we might be more willing or open to making some kind of change. So first, career coach Gina Marotta joins me again to talk about how she advises her clients through this question. She'll talk about some of the questions to ask, some of the things to consider, and really valuable exercises to go through so that you might be able to make this decision more clear based on where you're at in life right now. Then after that, I'm going to share a conversation that I had earlier in this show's history with my friend Renee Chevrier. At the time, I actually interviewed Renee a week after she decided to leave her full-time career in marketing and dive into the unknown, as she wasn't sure what her next career move was going to be. I just thought it was powerful to talk to someone going through this experience in real time. And I think you'll enjoy hearing Renee process how she got there, why she made the decision, and what's next for her. Okay, first up, please welcome back to the series career coach Gina Marotta. For you as a coach who works with people on making a decision like this, walk me through some of the process of how you help someone think about should they make some sort of change or transition to their working life.
Yes. So everybody starts in their own unique place, but there's some generalizations I could make. When someone is considering, do I want to change? Do I want to quit my job? There's you could be at this starting point of just curiosity of I want to do something different. I'm not sure what it would be, but it's like an open curiosity. It's maybe not a need to change right away, but it's an inquiry. You could also come to this as someone who is in maybe a toxic work environment, or you're doing work that's really stressing you out. And so there's a different feeling behind that, which is more about frustration, real need for change. Or you could come to this situation, with a sense of, dread, going to work every day is really dragging you down and feeling really heavy. And so it's sort of where are you in the process, to start with that. And usually people may come to me and they want to quit right away. That's what has them pay money for a coach to say, get me out of here.
Yeah.
But in most situations, honestly, it's not an immediate change, because what you're trying to do then is run away from something, as opposed to move positively toward a direction that's aligned for you. I do always check in with someone, if you're in a really toxic environment that's making you sick, that's creating, severe issues, okay, let's look at you exiting that right away, but with some foundational safety. If it's not that, usually stay in that job while you're in the inquiry of what's next. And what that will mean is that you're maybe working out some stuff in that job that's going to help you prepare for the next thing. It's like it serves a purpose. And so one thing that I talk a lot about is what's called a transition role. So if someone is in that high stress job, when I was a lawyer, I had no space to dream about what was next because it was an intense job that demanded a lot of my time. So in that job, I couldn't try to figure out the next thing. So I needed to do something in between that gave me the space. And so if you're in either a toxic work environment or a high stress work environment, a transition role is a great way to go. So it's you're in between. You're not trying to go make more money or hustle harder. You're saying, what can I do with my skill set that actually is maybe a step back or just lateral, and then I have space. I have space to explore myself. For me, back in the day, this is way more common now. I did basically consulting work for other lawyers. I would take a piece of their work. I did writing projects for them. I could do it on my time. I didn't have to go to court or show up at a firm every day, right? So that's a big thing now. People doing consulting projects or freelance work as a way to get paid, have some spaciousness, and think about where do I want to go? So that's a big part of the beginning process is like, if you're trying to make a change, do you know where you want to go? And then what are those like first steps? Like, can I do this in this job? Or am I needing to just first focus on a transition role to create a solid foundation?
I'm curious about how you work with people through thinking about what might be next. So we've got kind of this stage of like, okay, first might be an awareness where someone might be aware of the fact that something about my work relationship or environment feels off. That might show up as stress. That might show up as just not feeling like you have space. It could be as much as not feeling psychologically safe at a work environment. It could be toxic. And so we might first have this awareness that something is off in this situation. How do we figure out what is next or what might be next?
Yes. So let me insert one thing before we get to that, because it's a great question, but there's actually one step before it. And the step before that is I call it reconnecting to your power. So many of us inside this, like what the education system taught us and the business corporate environments, the majority of them, not all of them, they create more of a victim mentality in us. Like, I need this job to pay my bills. I'm not safe without this. And so we get into this thinking that, oh my God, I can't have health insurance if I don't have a job. And it has this hold over us that companies love because people have a fear and want to stay and work sometimes ridiculous hours and chase the carrots and all of that. It works for the corporate system. So one of the first foundational things is to reconnect to your own power and in listening to yourself and your self-trust, which has been removed from us. So go back to you're in college and maybe you got excited to study a certain subject, philosophy, and then everybody's like, well, you're not going to make any money do that. Go to business school, right? And you change direction. Like, these are the things that happen that we stop trusting ourselves and we look outside ourselves for the answers. So a very foundational piece, this is another question, just like number one, is your work environment one you got to get out of right away to be in this inquiry? Okay, we have to check, we have to look at that. Number two, are you connected to your own sense of power to create your destiny and to listen to and trust yourself as the guide to your path?
Wow.
Right? So we have to work on that too, because that's going to become essential to the things that are going to come later down the line. Like to quitting your job, you can do it scared out of your mind and unsure what's going to be next. Or the way I take clients through it is there's a foundation and a trust. If this is the moment to quit my job, I'm ready and I know where I'm going next.
That feels like a really important step. For me, that was similar to my experience. I started my working career at a big Fortune 100 company, and that was part of it. Is overcoming some of those fears and becoming aware of the fact that, like, the system is built in a certain way that it makes it harder. It makes it feel harder and more challenging to choose to exit the system because it feels like there are so many things working against you. You mentioned things like access to healthcare and that being a really big one for many people. So I really resonate with taking a look at the systems themselves and how they are incentivizing certain behavior is really important so that you can become aware of that and maybe choose to do something else or differently. So now let's talk about that. This idea of thinking about what is next and where do you as a coach go now?
Yes, yes. So with those foundations, what we really start to explore is what I call your genius. I didn't obviously come up with that word, but I want to define how I describe it because, we may look at that a certain way. Like we might look at it like we think of like Albert Einstein, what a genius. Oh man, what he did was so hard. But the truth is, when I talk about genius, it's like your natural innate talent. You were born with it. You didn't have to go to school for it. You didn't have to do all that training. You didn't, right? Like again, the education system was set up to put people in certain types of work, but we all were born with talent. And so it's reconnecting with that. We're different people that are drawn to different things. My brother and I think is a really fun example because childhood shows us, if you look at children, they are acting out their natural gifts in the games they play, in the things they're interested in, curious about that no adult told them about. When I was growing up, my brother was obsessed with airplanes. And that meant he knew he needed to study weather patterns. He used to watch the weather every morning and leave my mom a weather report next to her bed. Like he was studying this stuff. He geeked out over it. He bought, flight simulator games for his computer. He saved up his money to go to space camp, right? Like this was just him being him in his life. Now me, on the other hand, just being me, I was picking up my mom's self-empowerment book and spirituality books. Like she was into that stuff. And I was like, ooh, I want to read this. Where my brother was like, I don't want to look at that stuff. That's boring, But I was so into it. I cared about human development. And I used to sit with my mom. And it's like if she was struggling with something, I was like 12 years old and I'm sitting with my mom, like, let's look through this book and what it tells you to do about how to feel better in this situation, right? Like that coaching gift was innate in me. And so it's like, that's just what I was born to do. I was wired to do that. Now, my brother and I are fun examples too, because there was no path for me that was like, oh, you have these gifts of talking to people and helping them spiritually evolve. I grew up Catholic, so I couldn't be a priest. There was no coaching industry yet. So for me, I was the susceptible one for sure to just being redirected in another path. My brother, there was a pathway, and he started literally taking flight lessons when he was 16 years old, and he's a pilot. He loves, his work, and he just always knew, what he was going to do. So we all have that. It's innate in our childhood. Some of us can't necessarily find or tap into that. For me, for example, I couldn't see those childhood gifts as showing my path. I had to look back. But there's other clues, which we can definitely talk about. But it is that innate talent that you're looking for.
So as someone reflects on that innate talent and reflects on some of those things that maybe some of those gifts that were present in their childhood before maybe they were forced down a certain path, if they can become more aware of those things, that can help direct them to a certain career path or job or business that maybe it would make sense for them to create, to tap into and to leverage those things more.
Yes, exactly. And let me tell you one of the big challenges, however, to seeing your genius. This is probably the number one challenge. And that is because your genius actually is fun and easy for you. And this really messes with what our programming is on work, which is about it's hard and you have to strive and right, and that's just the way it is. Well, that fits the corporate structure and the education system. So we work really hard, we go to school all those years, right? It fits that pattern. But so what we have to undo is this thinking that work is hard and trust and start to get used to in our bodies, in our nervous system, having a good time and finding ease in what we're doing. And part of why this is a struggle is, when we think of genius, we look at other people and we see their genius and you're like, oh, look at them. They're so great. Well, you're looking at someone else's genius that is not yours. So it does look hard to you, but to them, it's actually easy. And so you're looking for that in yourself. And it's just because it's your innate nature. For me, one-on-one coaching with a client, I'm also, another part of my genius is getting up in front of audiences and doing, inspirational engagements. Easy for me. So other people look at that and they're like, oh my God, I can't, get up and talk in front of a group of people, or, you on a mic hosting a conversation. To some people, that's going to feel really hard, really stressful. So it's really, this is the thing we have to override, is we've been programmed. It's hard, it's stressful. Nope, your genius zone feels fun and easy. And this goes back to the big picture we were talking about. If as a society we move in this direction, and this is what I do like with corporate teams, if we're moving in that direction of like, I'm doing this piece that feels easy and fun to me. Oh, I'm doing this piece that feels easy and fun to me. Oh, there's this thing I'm doing that's hard. Who else on the team can do that because it's easy for them? And you start to create this harmony in how people work together. Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's Chad here, and this is an ad for this show. I want to personally say thanks for tuning into the podcast. Whether this is your first episode or you've been here for a while, it means a lot that you're here. I'm not asking you for money. Actually, I'm asking for you to take a small action to help grow the show. More specifically, there's 3 things you can do to help grow the show and spread meaningful conversations like the ones that we have here. First is to leave a rating or review for the show on the platform that you're listening on. It takes about 10 seconds and can make a big difference. Number 2 is to subscribe or follow the show on whatever platform you're listening on, just so that you make sure you get notified of each episode that's published. Lastly, number 3 is to share the episode. Whether you send a text to a friend, talk about the episode at your next book club, or make a post on social media, sharing goes a long way to help. So thanks again for listening, and thanks in advance for taking a small action to help the show. Okay, back to the episode. Okay, so what about some of the more tactical pieces as far as we're kind of moving through this process, if you will, and we've taken awareness of some of the things that we might be feeling or experiencing. We've kind of pulled back some of the curtain and we've taken a look behind the system. We've thought about and reflected about our own genius and what that might look like. When it comes to some of the things of like making a change, you've got money and you've got bills and you've got health insurance and you've got some of these just more tactical things that make transitions difficult. What sort of advice do you have for someone on how they go about checking some of these different boxes, planning for it, thinking about what is important in a transition? How does that look?
So I'm going to tell you my perspective on this that may not be everyone's. Okay. But I couldn't do it any other way. And so for me, it really is about spirituality or a trust that the universe is supporting you, that it is not just me, Gina. I carry all this weight on my shoulders to move forward and figure this out. It is a sense that I'm part of a greater whole, that there is a God or a loving being that created us all, and we're all created to work in this sense of harmony. So cultivating a sense of faith that, again, the corporate structures have destroyed that, and they've turned it into like your boss is your God. And, the company is your God, and that's who you serve, and that's who takes care of you. But if we pull back and look, again, not at religion, but spiritually, like, wait, why are we here? How are we created? What are we supposed to be? We can see that there is this natural harmony that we're meant to work in, that we can close our eyes, listen to our own hearts, and receive the answers and the wisdom and the guidance. So again, going back to like, I've reestablished my own sense of self-trust. The other piece of this journey is like, you're going to make decisions. Do I quit my job? Do I find another role in my company? Am I ultimately going to start my own business? Like, all these decisions are going to come up. What will I do about health insurance if I'm starting my own business? And these can feel like, oh my God, I don't have the answer. If you're disconnected from a greater universe that is actually designed to support you. So with my clients, I help them find their way to reconnect with that. I'm not trying to push any kind of spiritual particular avenue. Some clients come to me with a religion that they believe in. Some people are saying, gosh, I feel disconnected from that. Can you open some doors and I'll see what resonates? So it's about finding whatever that is for you that reconnects you to the greater whole of humanity or a sense of God or the universe that is truly supporting you. Corporations supporting you? Most of them not so much, but the universe will. And so again, that's why this takes time. That I don't rush a client through quitting a job unless it's a toxic situation, but building up that sense of trust and like actually observing, like, you can do things like, so one of the common practical steps with a client is, let's say they identify a new direction they want to go. It's like a skill that they've always had, but they've never put it forward in their career. Okay. Let's say for you, I don't know exactly what you did before, but let's say for you, it was like, yeah, I love like interviewing people and getting to the heart of issues and right. And so, you might have your job and I'm coaching you and you're in your job and you're getting your paycheck, but you might say, well, I'm going to find an opportunity in my company to host fireside chats. I'm going to play around with this idea. The company wants to do some educational programming. I love doing interviews. I'm going to offer myself to share that gift. So you start testing it even in your own company. Or it could be, I'm going to just do a few podcast episodes. I'm going to see, this is a thing. So you test it. You just put yourself out there in a way that is an exploration. You're not trying to make money. You're just seeing, okay, is the universe supporting this? And what happens is, if you are in your genius zone, you're going to see that it is, and you're going to see doors start to open. And so it's a relationship. Think about it as like a really good friend who wants to help you, not somebody who has their own interests in mind, right? Because there are people like that. But the person who's like, I got your back. And, if you were like, okay, I want to try out this thing I love, that friend's going to keep being there to say, here, can I give you this? Oh, let me show you that. That's what the universe will do when you start following what is your dream, your innate gift, and puts sort of the rest of the world in harmony. So there you go.
It's amazing to me how it is a recurring theme on the show and in these conversations. When we are looking for external answers and what do we do in this scenario and what should I do and how should I think about this, so often in those conversations the people that I'm talking to will go back to turn within, your gut, your intuition, your sense of knowing, like that is all within you to both understand these things, to understand yourself, and to navigate them and be able to, as these different decisions come along, turn inward to yourself. And that's going to be your greatest sense of knowing and truth. And it's been a journey for me in that the more I can do that, the more I can turn inward, the more I can
Yes.
listen and become aware of what I know within me and have that be the place that I make some of these decision from, hasn't led me astray too much.
Yes, that's right on. And I know you and your audience probably want a few pieces of practical wisdom, so I'll share some on that. One is, when you're going to do that, when you're going to be turning within, something else to just be looking for is who in your life really supports that. Because some people in their own fear will not support you taking risks, following your own dreams, going a different direction. They're like relying on you to stay where you are, and like they are, right? So it's something to pay attention to. And sometimes that's why a coach is really necessary. Some people may be like, wow, I don't have anybody in my life who's really just out for me and my good. I see it a lot with clients. They come in and they're engaged to someone, and I hear about their relationship and I hear about how that person is, and I'm like, oh well, if we're gonna follow your genius, that person's not gonna last. I see that quite often, because it is about, not everybody in your life has to be that supportive, but you have to find one or two, and because that creates a safety net for you, that it's okay to be yourself. So that's a bit of like the foundations for you. But to actually go within, I have two practices I can offer for someone who might be new to this. one, it's a meditation, or I call it just a heart practice. And I'm a teacher on the Insight Timer app, which is a meditation app. There's thousands of teachers on there. It's totally free, although you can, of course, upgrade your package, but what you can access with me is free. And on there, if you just find me as a teacher, the heart practice is 3 minutes of me guiding you to listen to your heart. And what I love about it is, like, it's great whether you have meditated before or not. The focus is really about getting out of your head and into your heart. So I'm just guiding you to place a hand on your heart and just be there in appreciation for that space. And what I find is, doing this practice for 2 weeks, people are reconnected to themselves, their own intuition. There's a lot less fear and doubt. So a simple practice like that, 3 minutes in the morning, totally guided, you don't have to think of anything other than hitting play, is a great starting point. And then if you're someone who is wanting to tap more into your genius, there's an ebook on my website called The Genius Reflection Practice. And it explains what genius is, so you get more of that foundation, but it's ultimately guiding you to this daily journaling practice of 4 questions that help literally show you your genius. So it's like a mirror. It's why I call it the reflection practice. You're answering these particular questions that you'll start to see, like, they're showing you what your genius is. So for example, the lead question is, what did I do today where I felt the most alive and, like, just lit up? Well, you're in your genius zone when you feel that way. And so the 4 questions will guide you to see what that is, and also show you what you may be doing because you were trained to do, but actually drains out your energy. So these are the few ways that I often start people out with to listen to themselves, because, as you say, that really is the starting point.
Mm. Gina, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a delight.
So, as I mentioned back in 2023, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Renee Chevrier, on the show. The conversation came about because Renee had just told me that she had left her director role of a marketing and branding agency less than a week ago. At the time of our interview, I thought it'd be cool to capture what led to that decision and how it felt in that moment. I mean, it was so real and raw at that time. She was in the midst of going through this big life change, and I figured that'd make some interesting reflection, and I can tell you, it sure did. So for this episode in the series, I'm going to play back for you a snippet of that conversation, starting with Renee telling us about when she started to think about making a career change and leaving her job.
I'm typically a very rational and planned out person. I like to have goals. I like to be like meeting those goals and like following a plan. And I think probably maybe in like late 2019, I started, well, actually, shout out to Eileen and Kelly at the space. I remember going to the release class for my first time with Eileen, and Kelly asked this question in one of her sessions where she said, like, who were you before the world told you what to be? And I had never had that question be asked to me before. And I was like, oh, wow. Like it just kind of like hit me really emotionally. And I think that sort of like kicked off this spiral for the past maybe 3 or 4 years of me just diving into that in my own way, in a very maybe slow and I don't know, just like introductory space, and then diving deeper and deeper and deeper to where I reached this point in my life a couple months ago where I was like, I need to make some bigger changes, and I need to be open, create space and open my mind and my life to new opportunities and just try things rather than having this very calculated version of my life. And that led to where I'm at now. So I recently quit my job. It's been about a week now that I've been into this either self-employed or unemployed lifestyle, and just seeing where it takes me. So that's kind of a short answer to the long thing that we'll probably dive into of what brought me here.
So this question of who were you before the world told you who to be,
Mm-hmm.
Had you ever been asked a question like that
No.
before, or thought about something like that?
Never been asked a question like that. And I also, because I'm very much like a goal-oriented person, and it's like, okay, someone tells you that this is the goal. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get there first, or like, I'm going to work really, really hard to like be the best at that. And that's my mentality. And when I like see something, I go after it. And so that question of like, who were you before the world told you who to be? It just like, it hit me like really right in the heart. And I was like, what have I been going after in my life that like maybe isn't truly something I want to be going after? Or what are the decisions or lifestyle choices that I've made that maybe aren't really mine or someone else's? Whether that's your parents or culturally or friends, whoever, comparisons, and just starting to dive into like, who am I guess, which sounds like a crazy question to ask yourself in your early to mid 30s. Because I think you always think when you're younger, like, oh, by the time I'm 30, like I'll have it all figured out. And then you reach that point and you're like, I don't know anything. And I guess just being willing to explore that and be okay with kind of throwing some things out the window.
So walk me through this process of, this awareness. You were asked this question 3 or 4 years ago, and that started to bring some of your awareness around, maybe there's something else out there for me, or maybe there is this version of Renee that existed before the world taught me, who I should be. Well, I guess first let's, fill in some of the gaps, I guess, between
the 3-year, 4-year gap.
Yeah. And tell us about the path that you have been on professionally, because, hearing you talk about how you are a very driven person, and like the way that I've gotten to know you and experience you, I've always looked up to you as someone who, you just seem like you're on this mission, and like no matter what's going to be thrown at you, you're going to be good at it. You're going to be effective at it. You can speak about what you do with confidence. Just kind of seeing about how you would operate and go about your work, and you were rising through your company. And so that idea that I feel like you were doing so many of the things that so many people would say, like, that's amazing. That's fantastic. And I would look at you and say, wow, maybe I should be more like Renee. So just kind of tell us about the path that you were on that ultimately you decided, recently that you were going to pivot from.
All right, cool. I'm going to go back a little bit farther. So I think one thing that I just want to point out before I start on this, one thing you said at the beginning was like the awareness. I think like the self-awareness and the self-reflection is a really important piece of feeling like you're aligned to who you want to be, or who you truly feel like is authentic to you. And one thing that I think I've always struggled with is I didn't have a ton of self-awareness because I was so goal-oriented. It was like, all right, there's the finish line, head down, sprint towards it as fast as you can. And then when you get to it, then you look up. And so I think what has happened to me in like my life chunks is I've been sprinting towards goals, and then I look up and I'm like, okay, where's the next one? And then I sprint to that. And so 2016 is about when I started at my former organization, Tilt. I actually had done a bit of a life pivot before that. I went to school for accounting, and I kind of went into that major not knowing what I wanted to do with my life going into college, which I think a lot of 17, 18-year-olds feel. They're like, pick a career for the rest of your life. And you're like, oh, okay, this one. But being my rational self, which I think you said this earlier, I think you and I can relate to some of those attributes of like, okay, what's going to give me job security and stability? And when I come out of college, I'm going to have a job. And it was like accounting, become a CPA. And that's what my older brother had done as well. So I went into that career path. And around my junior year, I was like, I don't know, this doesn't feel like this is the right choice for me, but people told me like, you're really good at math and maybe accounting's right. And like, FYI, everyone, like accounting is not math at all, but it was like, okay, that works, which has nothing to do with thinking back to like my childhood self of like being a famous singer or like being an architect or all the other things that you had like your dream careers. Now I'm in accounting. So I also, because I like to start the things that I finish, I was like, nope, I already chose this major. Like, this is your life that you're going to live. And I got a job at PwC, which is one of the big four accounting firms. And I did that for a couple of years. And Nate jokes about, well, I don't know if it's a joke. It's a joke now that we got through this, but he's like, I don't know if we would still be together if you would have kept that job, because you were completely like, you just weren't happy. You weren't a fun person to be around. You were really miserable. And after 2 years of that job, I was like, I think I have to make a change. Like, what's the most risk averse way that I can make a change in my life? And I was like, you know what? I always wanted to go back to grad school. I'm going to quit and I'm going to go back to grad school for my MBA, which still feels like it's in that business pathway. A lot of people get their MBAs once they're in a business career. I was like, this is a smart, and it'll give me a little bit of space to figure out what's next. So I did that for a couple of years, 2-year program. And after that, I got this opportunity to work for Tom Lasorda. He was the old CEO of Chrysler. And after he retired from Chrysler, he started a venture capital fund called Inkwell. So he gave me an opportunity to work at Inkwell, and then also at his mainly launching and running his daughter's mail order bakery, which was called The Baker's Tale. And after 2 years of that, some things happened and she decided she wanted to have a life pivot and move on from that. And he's like, what do you want to do? And he connected me to Lawrence, who is the partner at Tilt. It was the Frameworks then. And I was like, I want to do like marketing and strategy. Like, that's where I feel like it kind of combines the right side and the left side of your brain, where accounting was only like the very analytical side. Marketing and advertising, like that can kind of be this blend that I'm looking for between like art and science and analytical and free thinking.
Do you think if you could have gone back and chosen, kind of re-chosen your major, or chosen a major at that time that felt more in alignment with what you wanted to do, would you have gone more of that marketing strategy route at that time?
Oh, that's a hard question. I don't like thinking about like regret a lot, or maybe regret isn't the right word to use for that. I don't think I would change it. And I'm saying that because I feel like if I wanted to go into something else, I could always go back to school now. But I'm very grateful for the experience that I had in that realm. And I think even my experience at PwC, it built, hey Sadie, it built a lot of just foundational experience and learning how to work in like a huge conglomerate of an organization. Like, I don't know. I would not change that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. Okay. So marketing and strategy though was kind of calling to you.
Calling to me. I got connected with the Framework/Tilt, and I started. One thing that I haven't been afraid to do through the course of my career is make lateral moves versus like the traditional vertical pathway. I came into Tilt with the experience of doing more like operations and finance. And that was the role that they had open at the time. And Lawrence was awesome. And he was like, hey, create your own job description. Like, you have to start in here, but like, what do you want? And I was like, okay, I'll come in and I'll do the finance and operations side, but like, I really want to get into strategy. Like, that's where I'm really passionate about right now, and something that I think I could be really good at. Starting in 2016, I took on the finance and operations. At that time, we were like a 5-person agency, which is something that I really love, is like that sort of startup feel. And I started with the, I guess, goal or ambition of really leading the strategy department at Tilt, which is really where I was at this past year. But I was now doing that in an organization that is now 40 people. Maybe there's some twists and turns happening that as the organization grows, it naturally changes courses and pivots in different ways. And I think back in 2019, I'm trying to tie this back together, Kelly asked that question, and it planted a seed in my being to just maybe start asking questions that contradict the path you're on. And this was not by any means a like brash or like, oh, she asked that question and I'm going to completely like change my life. It was more of just, like I said, a seed where it was like, just start like testing and evaluating if the things that in the path that you're on are really aligning to like who you want to be and what you want to create in the world. And I guess from there, it just kept kind of blossoming. I kept asking the questions. Nate and I had a lot of conversations around like when the right time might be for me to leave, or if it was even the right timing. I think timing is important. We could talk about that. And then it led to this past May or June when I was like, it's time. Like I had this sense of confidence in myself that I was willing to, I guess, quote unquote, bet on myself in a way that I had never had before in the past. And I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to accept failure. I'm ready to accept that, you know, there's going to be these paradoxical experiences like we were talking about earlier, that maybe I'll have a really great day and maybe I'll have a really low day and experience, and I'm going to be okay with that. And that's where I'm at now.
As you talk about some of these questions or things that you started questioning, walk us through what some of those things were that you found yourself maybe continuously coming back to and sort of wondering about or questioning, you know, could this be different? Were there some things that stood out to you that you kept kind of reoccurringly coming back to?
I think one of the main things was just like a self-check on the way that I was feeling about like waking up every day and doing something. And so one thing that I know I still really love is like the work that I was doing with clients was really exciting. Like, but at the end of the day, I guess, like thinking about when I wake up in the morning, yes, every day is not going to be this like, yes, I love what I do. But I found myself over the course of the past couple of years almost like dreading going to meetings and not having enough time to spend on the things that I felt like I thought were my priorities. And because I was always working, and we recently moved here to Arizona, and we've been here for the past year and a half. And that first year, it was so like there's all these new things to be doing, and there would be nights where I would just be like working really late and not having these experiences that I wanted to have with Nate, Jared, and Orla. And so I think it just continued to, I guess, snowball from there of like, are the things that I say are my priorities and the things that I want to nurture and cultivate in my life, is that aligning with the behaviors and the things that I'm actually doing? It's not an easy evaluation, and sometimes the answer isn't what you want to hear, but I guess that's kind of what started to snowball from it.
And as you sit here now, what were those answers as far as what you wanted out of life and who you wanted to spend your time with and who you wanted to become? What did you find?
One thing for myself was that I don't have the answer to your question in like a beautiful, articulate way, but I do know what are the things that I want to be doing. So one thing that I want to be doing is creating and holding space for myself to explore ideas and opportunities and feelings that I never felt like I could when I was younger. I think when you're, and maybe you can relate to this, when you do reach that point in your childhood where you're like, the switch comes on, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to accomplish things. I think you start to ignore a lot of feelings that I would classify as bad feelings, of like frustration and anger and things that maybe I should have like processed that I never did. And you just kind of ignore it because you're going after something and you're looking for the positive reinforcements. So one thing that I know that I really want out of this next chapter of my life is being able to create space to have ideas and try new things. I want to spend time and be around people that have, I mean, everyone's going to say this sounds super cliche, but like have the same like values as I do. I think this is happening from my perspective, in a lot of industries where people are working in organizations, and I think they question, like, am I working for people that I believe in, or that have the same values as me, or that treats people the way that I would treat people? And so I think I want to be around in my everyday life and in my career life. I want to be around people that share those values and really value people. I want to be spending most of my time with the people that are pushing me and challenging me, asking me questions that maybe I'm too scared to ask myself. Those are the people I want to be around. And more specifically, I guess, be around people that also create a safe space for you to make mistakes and try new things. And I think I want to be around more people that are like that are just willing to put themselves out there and be uncomfortable, and let's try new things together and create something new.
So I'm curious then, you know, as I reached out to you, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is I'm so fascinated by it. At one point I was toying around with calling this podcast something along the lines of The Pivot, or something about something kind of similar to that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, something I'm just so curious about is it comes up so often, like when we built the van and we live in the van and we're traveling, and so many people will say to us, like, I'm so jealous. I wish I was doing that. I want to be doing that so badly. And so I'm just so curious about this idea and this concept of how there seems to be pretty commonly, I notice that people have this vision for their life that's oftentimes somehow, some way different than what their life currently looks like. And this could be work oriented, this could be travel oriented, this could be identity oriented, it could be so many things. And societally, I just feel like there seems to be a gap between people recognizing and wanting something different and then actually doing something about it. And so walk us through, what do you attribute to kind of moving you from, okay, you're doing this questioning, you had this question posed to you 3 or 4 years ago, you're starting to cultivate more awareness, you're starting to question some of the things, you're starting to think about what your priorities are. How did you actually go from that to doing something about it, if you had to dissect that?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is just really getting in tune with yourself, and there is definitely a gut element in this, in the sense of like trusting your gut. Once you start to tune into yourself and really figuring out like what feels like I'm on the right path, what feels like I'm on the wrong path, which sounds kind of woo-woo, but like that was my experience of like, you just start to get this feeling of like, oh, this just doesn't feel right. Or, oh, this, I'm doing something like this, like really sounds like that's what I want to do. And just continuing to dive into that gut feeling of like what feels right, what feels wrong. And then I think the other thing is this is not breaking news, but like, it's not going to be easy, and you're going to have to potentially reprioritize things in your life. A lot of, as I was going through this journey, the timing just wasn't right for what was happening, what other things were happening in my life to like make a big move like that. And so being, I guess, okay with like, okay, I'm going to continue down this path, knowing that I'm just going to continue to explore like, okay, what, when it does reach that point where the timing does feel a little bit better, there's never a time where it feels absolutely right. Being ready to make that move. And so going back to that, we had to talk about like, okay, what would we be willing to give up for some of the things that we might want in our future, and trying to find a balance of what are the things that we're willing to sacrifice on, because we know that we're trading it in for something else that we want. And you're never going to have this like big jump that you take and you get to take all of the things that you like about your current life into that next life. I think there's always going to be some form of like compromise, or what potentially could feel like sacrifice now, but just feeling really confident about like, I know that this is going to create something else that I really, really want.
aside from maybe some of the more material things, what else do you feel like you had to come to terms with sacrificing in order to make this jump?
There's this quote in my chiropractor's office, and I'm gonna botch it, but it's something like progress and comfort can never coexist, or like you can't have progress without leaving comfort behind, or something like that. And it's, to me, it's really, really true. And I think that we go through stages in life where you're probably going to like lean more towards progress and change, and then need to lean more towards like comfort and stability. And I think when you're in a relationship with someone, sometimes you're doing that at different times. So I think like Nate had a period where he was going through a lot of change and making progress. And I felt like, okay, I need to be more of the like stability and security side to balance that out. And then now we've reached this point where we are like, okay, well, what if we both were leaning more into the change and transformation side? What would that look like? And I think I definitely have had to, I don't like risk. Like I'm a very risk averse person, and I've had to definitely give up some of my desires to have stability, to have a regular paycheck, to know that I can afford the things that I want to buy without like thinking, like having to question like, okay, wait, do I really need this? And at the same time, it's also just like really exciting. And I guess this goes back to like a lot of emotions and things are true for me right now. Like I think I'm still grieving a little bit of the path that I was on, and then also just being really excited and encouraged of what could be. And I don't know, I'm still learning a lot. But yeah, giving up comfort and stability is a big thing, I think. But when you have people around you that are always like those constant people, I think maybe stability can come from something that I didn't always think it could come from. Like I always assigned it to like money and job security and having a nice house. And maybe now it's the people, like that's my stability and security. And that gives me the, I don't know, extra boost to go out in the world and try something new.
Well, I think that's really interesting, challenging some of these kind of traditional words and what they mean. Security, stability. I've found myself doing some of that as well. And it's just like success is a big one. Risk has been an interesting one that I've been looking at recently. And just thinking about some of those things, and going back to that idea of just questioning and being willing to take a look at, how is this typically defined? And if I wanted to define it my way, what would that look like for me? And that's been a very interesting process to just take that step back and pause for a second and think about the idea that the way that we interpret these words doesn't have to necessarily be the way that we interpret them forever.
I think that's spot on. I love that. I also think a word you just said, like the pause, I think it's really hard a lot of times to press pause on your life. And especially when it feels like you're always on a timetable of some sorts, or you're going to miss something if you don't keep, going as fast as possible. The pause is so valuable. Like that's, I almost feel like that's where I'm at right now in my life, as I am doing a pause. I left my job and I'm in this new spot, but I don't know where I'm going next. And I am really embracing that idea. I think of the pause, of just being and experiencing what comes in my path and what feels really right, or what gets me really excited, and exploring what that could be. So I like the idea of encouraging and creating space for this pause in life.
Well, I hope both of these conversations provided some things for you to think about and to tune into feeling. The more I go through life and the more conversations that I have like these, I continue to find myself leaning into the idea of feeling versus thinking. If you're a really cerebral type person, like I have been, where you make a lot of decisions with logic and by thinking, I don't know, maybe it's time to approach a decision like this in a new way. Maybe it's time to think about, how do you feel about your current work situation? What would it feel like to make a change? Notice that intentional change in language, and I'm curious what that brings up for you. When I'm talking about feeling, be still for a little while. See what comes up in your body and what sensations that you notice. And I don't know, maybe you'll arrive at a different conclusion than you would have otherwise, relying on the thinking brain. I'll tell you that in the last few years of my life, this practice has been a big shift for me, as I've been someone who thought about things and made very logical decisions, and that felt really important to me. It felt like the right way to make decisions, and the wrong way was to make a really emotional decision. Well, in recent years, I've been leaning into this idea of feeling things, making decisions based more on feeling and more of sensations that are occurring in the body. And although it's a very ongoing practice and something that I am practicing and trying to become more in tune with, something about it has also felt really good. And it's led me to some really interesting places that I'm not sure my thinking brain would have taken me to. So I encourage you to give it a try, and maybe it'll give you some different perspective on this idea of, should I quit my job? All right, my friend, that's all for this episode in the series. Be sure to stay tuned for more in the coming weeks, as I'll have more around this idea of, what are we working for? We'll see you then.